I'm going to analyze some points from the women's doubles final of the SpecTennis US Open. So let's back it up and analyze that first point. So the players that we have are Gabby, so I'm putting a G, and so she's on the far left side from our perspective. And then we have Young Hung, putting a Y right there. She's on the far right side from our perspective, so she's on the serving team. And so watch as Gabby serves, and they both start running forward, but Gabby gets a lot further forward than Young Hung before their opponents hit the balls. So Young Hung right there is in a tough volley position. Gabby's in a better volley position, being closer to the net. And that can be attributed to the size of the steps that they are taking. So if we look here, we zoom in on this, you can see after Gabby serves, she's taking pretty large size steps. Young Hung is not taking very big steps to move forward, and that is limiting her in terms of how close she gets to the net before the opponent's hit. So if she just simply increases that step size, she's going to put herself in a better volley position. Now, the next thing I want you to notice is Young Hung comes forward, but she's stopping a little bit late. See, the ball's already in the frame of the screen. She stops a little bit late. She stops after her opponent has hit the ball. And so this makes it difficult to change direction quickly to react to the next shot. So watch that again. She's still moving, ball's in the frame. She stops now. The ball's already being hit to her, and so that really rushes her reaction time. And watch as she actually backs up to let this ball bounce. Now, had she stopped a little bit sooner, right when her opponent's paddle start moving forward, then she could react to the next ball by potentially moving forward. So even though she's in a bad volley position right now, it doesn't mean that she has to play a shot from this position of the court. If she does a split step before her opponent hits the ball, so as their paddle's moving forward, then she'll have the opportunity to actually move in any direction to get that volley, put herself in a better volley position. Now, zooming back out on that, she actually does a good thing, though, Young Hung, in that she backs up to play it, which I don't love, but if she was ready sooner, she would have been able to play it at least in front of her. But what she does is she hits the ball to the player that's further from the net. So she has a defensive shot, right? She's having to back up to play it. And so she definitely wants to keep it away from Vanessa. So that's Vanessa right there. And this is Carmen right here. And so instead, she hits that ball back to Carmen, which is great because Carmen's closer to the baseline, so she can't do as much damage. Then Young Hung does a really good thing by coming closer to the net. Carmen hits a really good shot right at the body. And so Young Hung's goal, again, should be to keep that ball back to Carmen, but instead she hits the ball to Vanessa. So watch here. She has a difficult volley, and it's on her paddle right now. Difficult volley. This ball should go back to the player that's further from the net because it's difficult, right? It kind of jammed her, but instead this volley goes back at Vanessa, and even though she hit a pretty good shot, Vanessa's still able to make a pretty good play and make Gabby make a mistake on the next shot. And so as a rule of thumb, when you have a difficult volley, you want to try to keep the ball to the player that's further from the net. When you're attacking a volley, then you can go at the player who's closer to the net. Obviously, that might not always be an option. If the ball comes at you fast, you're simply just trying to make it back. But had she hit this last ball to Carmen, I think the story of the point would have been a little bit different. Right, Vanessa right here has a difficult volley, but she manages to hit it right at Gabby pretty fast. And so Gabby has a difficult volley herself, and she ends up missing that shot out. Now, if you look at the way that Gabby volleys this ball, I would say there's 3 different options that I would have chosen instead of this. So look at the position that she's in right now, right? Her paddle is actually veering towards her backhand side. She's leaning a little bit off balance to play this shot. It's going to be difficult to hit a good shot. And so option number 1 is I think Gabby could have played a backhand volley, right? She could have flipped her paddle around, played a backhand volley. right? Then she wouldn't have been in this off balance leaning position, but just play a backhand volley there. Option number 2 is let Young Hung get the ball, right? So let her get the ball with a nice strong forehand volley, because if you watch, Young Hung does a good thing here. After she hits this volley, she shifts over to follow the ball, right? So the ball goes to Vanessa, and Young Hung shifts over to follow it. And so now she's in a really good position to cover balls in the middle, especially with her forehand on a high ball. So that's option number 2, is just let Young Hung take that shot. Option number 3, and I don't know if there's enough time in this scenario for option 3, but Gabby could potentially move this way. So she moves her right foot around to make space to play a high forehand volley. So rather than her paddle, going onto her backhand side, she's moving her feet around to get out of the way of the ball and keep the paddle on the right side of her for a nice, easy forehand. But who knows, based on this scenario, maybe Vanessa hit the ball fast at her. Maybe she didn't have time to take that step around it. Now, moving on to the next point, Gabby serves, Carmen returns, and Carmen does a really nice job of recognizing which player is further from the net and hitting the return that way. Oftentimes, hitting a cross-court return can make more sense percentage-wise, but if you recognize that a player is not getting that close to the net, in this case, Young Hung is not getting as close as Gabby is, then it can be good to hit the return at that person because you have more margin of error. And so watch as Carmen hits a ball that is landing near Young Hung's feet. Again, Young Hung is in a mid-court position, kind of a tough position. But like we said in the last point, if Young Hung can split step before the ball gets hit to her, right? Notice she hasn't really stopped yet and you already see the ball into the frame. Then she can react by moving forward to that volley instead of playing a half volley. So your goal is, after you split step, you want to move towards the ball and you want to avoid playing a half volley if you have the opportunity of playing a volley. So if Young Hung stops right now and does a split step here, then she can track where Carmen's ball is going, and I think she can move closer to the net to play the ball out of the air rather than being stuck because she's trying to decelerate as the ball's coming at her and having to play a half volley. Right, so by not split stepping right when her opponent starts her swing, she's putting herself in a very defensive position on that first volley. This point I really like because Young Hung, this player over here, she hits a nice high serve, which gives her a lot of time to move forward to a much better volley position than previous points. So watch how this ball floats through the air. And Vanessa, the player returning the serve, doesn't have much choice but to wait for it because it has to bounce. Look how deep it lands in the court. And that gives Young Hung a lot of time to get into a good volley position. So on previous points we've seen, Young Hung has not gotten that close to the net, but here she's in a better position when Vanessa goes to hit the ball. Now, Vanessa does a nice job of directing that ball back at Young Hung because, again, Young Hung is further from the net than Gabby is. But then Young Hung, if you watch carefully here, she hits a nice deep volley. So she opens the face of her paddle because the ball's low. So that's a really good thing to do when the ball's low. Then you don't risk hitting the net as much. Opens the face of her paddle. And since Vanessa is not very close to the net, she can afford to float that volley a little more. And notice how she pushes Vanessa back. So Vanessa initially comes in after hitting her shot. And then she pushes Vanessa back with her high, deep volley. Vanessa goes back. It might be a good idea for Carmen to retreat back a little bit as well, because when you back up, you typically hit more of a defensive shot. So if Vanessa doesn't hit that well, then Carmen might be in trouble on the next shot. The net team on the other side might be able to target Carmen. So let's see what happens here. So she hits the ball a little bit higher. So now it looks like Carmen could potentially be in trouble based on where she's standing. But again, I want you to look at this volley position from Gabby. She's having to really lean to her left to play this volley. The paddle actually ends up kind of on her backhand side. What I'd like to see instead of that is her taking her right foot and swiveling around so she gets out of the way of the ball, makes room for a nice high ball on her forehand side. So let's see how this plays out. She goes at Carmen on that volley. Notice it's bouncing a little bit short though, so Carmen has a good reaction time to it. Right? If you look at where that ball bounces and where Carmen is, if Gabby gets that ball a little deeper, it's tough. If she hits it that short, Carmen has a good reaction. And that gives her time to set up for a nice slice half volley through the middle of the court. Now, in this scenario, I think Young Hung should get very tight to the net. Gabby as well. They should be very close because it's going to be so hard for Carmen to lob from this position, being this close to the net. It's very hard to lob. So both of them should get very tight to the net. Gabby might slide over even a little bit more this way so that she can cover that middle. And watch as Carmen just puts some nice touch on the ball. Soft swing and keeps it low through the middle of the court to win the point. I think this team could have won this point starting here with this volley. If Gabby could have gotten out of the way of this ball just a little bit, I think she could have hit a stronger volley that didn't land too short in the court and give Carmen a good reaction time to be able to play that winner.